Hello and welcome to Dig It. I'm Peter Brown and hosting the show with me today is Chris Day. Hi Chris.
Hi Peter.
So, December in the garden, Chris. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, Peter. And yes, it's going a lot chillier. Those nights have really drawn in now, haven't they? And
they are. But have you had a frost? Because I reckon you said you'd had a frost a couple of months ago.
Yep, back in...
And I've not seen a frost in Northampton.
No, I think in October, late October, we had one. But since then, we've had some chilly nights recently. But I think the forecast, I have been looking, December is looking that bit colder, apparently.
So Jack's coming home. He's finally coming home. Because he's not... like I say, he's not been to Northampton this year.
No, well, let's hope we don't have the beast from the east, because obviously that's the worry, isn't it, as we go into early parts of December, that can obviously cause all sorts of problems for us gardeners.
Well, we've certainly had a lot of rain here in the last few days, haven't we? And I mean, I don't know whether the water tables will get properly replenished this winter, but it certainly seems... The rains have come back now, at least. So.
Yes, indeed. And I've noticed my wisteria is still hanging on to her leaves, incredibly. You know, some plants just want to hang on in there, but everything else is nicely... Yeah, the colour was good, if a bit short-lived, because of those winds we had and the heavy rain.
And with the warm weather we've had, I mean... I think mail ordered, all the plants turned up, last week? The week they're just... And I saw some quickthorn going out this morning, and they've still got leaves on.
Indeed. Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it, Peter? The retention of leaves, if we don't get those cold nights in sort of October, early November, has a knock-on effect. And I know fruit growers are very passionate that they don't like to let their trees go out of the nursery until they've
dropped their leaves.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's why you think that bare root... It's lost its leaves. It's not photosynthesizing. It's gone to rest for the winter. And I guess if it's still got leaves on and the roots are growing, you don't want to move it, do you?
And the other sort of implication of that is that when plants are moved, from nursery, if they've got leaves on, of course, leaves will generate heat, which can be a problem. And in fact, that is a major issue sometimes, that plants effectively can cook in transport, which is not unusual. So they
start composting down effectively, don't they?
Yeah, the compost heap starts with the plants, which is not a good way. So the quicker we can, get the plants out and obviously get plenty of air circulating around them. That's why when we heel them in, we do give them some space in the field for that to help to cool the foliage down, and hopefully the plants are then in nice rest ready for planting.
Excellent. And the other thing I saw sort of being set up was the area for the Christmas trees. It's not long for them either, is it?
Indeed, yes. And I think this year, Peter, we're doing with Nordsman fir.
Yep.
Obviously,
and we've got the budget range of Norway spruce coming back in for the first time in quite a few years.
Quite a few years, yeah.
So I think Christmas trees starting this year at £20, which is a nice price.
Indeed.
But equally, the thing that I'm really pleased about is the fact that the potted selection of Christmas trees, which I'd say 5 years ago might have been 50 or so plants, is growing. We went round to look at some other garden centres last week, and similar to us, their Christmas the live Christmas trees are already out, and they've got a good, I'd say some of them up to about a third of their space devoted to live trees now.
Yes, so that's suggesting to me that customers, and we know, customers, really love their Christmas trees, don't they? It's that attachment that you can keep the plant, growing from year to year, whether you pot it on and grow it as a specimen plant in a pot, or you pot the plant into the garden, plunge plant it maybe, and then bring it
in. Plunge planting, then you can keep the roots in a fairly compact sort of way, but it can grow some new taper roots. What are the
fibrous? Yeah.
So it can grow some new fibrous roots out of the holes in the pot, and obviously then you can semi-bonsai it, I suppose, in a way.
That's what you're doing, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, and that will keep the plant nicely retained. I would say if when you've bought your tree, when obviously you need to acclimatise it after Christmas anyway, you need to give it maybe into a porch, or if you've got a cold greenhouse, or in in a light garage, just give it maybe a sort of 4 or 5 weeks before you actually plant it out,
Okay.
because it's been in a nice warm house.
Yeah.
Through the festive season, and if if some of those people who
Put those straight out, it wouldn't go into a thermal shock, wouldn't it?
It'd get a bit of a chill, wouldn't it? And that's not good. And obviously make sure it's got plenty of water, obviously whilst it's indoors anyway, but certainly when you put it outside. And then maybe have a look at the root system and maybe pot it up into a slightly larger pot before you plunge plant it. Then it's got a bit of growing room.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's what I would do if I was going down that way. But if it's a Norseman, one of these wonderful Norway, the Norway's good because it has very small needles, and of course those needles can fall. But obviously Norsemen have much thicker, more robust, and obviously very they're quite textural, aren't they? They've got a lovely sort of resinous material on them, and they obviously hang on so much better.
But does a live Christmas tree smell as much as a cut one?
Oh, I would have thought so. Yes, yeah, most definitely. Because as soon as you bring a Christmas tree into the home, you obviously get
that lovely aroma, don't you? And I think that's where the plastic trees miss out.
Indeed.
We sell scent sticks just to give the authentic Christmas tree smell to your plastic tree. It's brilliant.
And they're very, very popular, and they do work. I tend to use a few of those on one of my trees, and it does give you that nice sort of Christmassy feeling, doesn't it?
It definitely boosts the smell somewhat, doesn't it?
It does.
Another question, Chris, with the live Christmas trees. Presumably, if you're plunge planting them and chopping the roots back, you can actually, you could essentially bonsai it. So if you buy, once it gets to say 6 foot tall, you probably don't want it to get much taller. You could actually keep it at 6 foot tall, and the trunk will just get slowly bigger and bigger.
It would. The plant will still want to produce its obviously its main shoot in the spring, so you'd probably need to sort of taper that back. So you might need to get the secateurs out and trim it. Okay. But then when you look at most of the trees you buy in the garden centres now, they are all trimmed. They're given quite to what I'm thinking about sort of 20 years ago. The tree came in as it was cut from the field. Now, no, there's a lot more passion from the Christmas tree growers to get in much better shape.
Well, I think that's what they all strive for these days, isn't it? Is the perfect sort of pyramid shape, and they go out pruning a couple of times a year, and it does make a big difference.
It does, and that's usually done, if memory serves me correctly, during sort of June, July into early August, so it gives the plant time to recover. So that's the time perhaps to go out there and just give it a little bit of a trim because obviously you're going to see the tree in your own house. You're going to know how wide you want it to grow or what space you've got to fill in.
So you could actually trim it into a really narrow, thin tree if you wanted to, or make it really wide and take up lots of space.
Indeed.
That's a good
lots
idea.
Of options. But...
Well, I know when I moved into my house, the previous owners had planted a Christmas tree in the garden, and to be fair, we recycled it here, and it went into the car park about 4 or 5 years ago. Excellent. And it had got to about 30 foot tall by the time we cut it down, so it had a good life.
Indeed, a lot of the Christmas tree growers, don't they? Their pledge is always to plant at least 4 for every tree they cut. I think that's the minimum they do. So,
all right.
So obviously they get their yield on their acreage is obviously somewhat increased, and that's why they are properly farmed. And a lot of people do get a little bit sensitive to the fact that cut trees are they actually environmentally friendly? Well, I think they are if they're farmed properly, which of course in the UK they certainly are.
Do they have FSC certificates on them?
I haven't noticed.
I've never looked. I'm going to have a look this year. See if our Christmas trees are from sustainable stock. Brilliant. I'm thinking back to last year. We had a very good interview with Jane Perrone, didn't we? Who's the houseplant expert, and reminds me about her comments about poinsettias.
She's not the biggest fan, shall we say?
She's not, but we've got ours coming in very shortly, or are they in now?
Yes, they're actually nicely displayed. All UK, locally grown, not sort of 30 minutes from the garden centre is our poinsettia grower.
Really? Where are they based?
They're Leighton Buzzard, so literally in Bedfordshire. So
wow.
Yeah, so they couldn't be any closer. In other years we've got them from the south coast, from down in Sussex, but this year again we're returning to something a little bit local, and again it helps on our
carbon footprint. carbon miles, isn't it? So that's always good, and equally helping our local growers.
Indeed, yeah. And I think, poinsettias obviously are a high maintenance crop, and of course they'll use lots of energy, as we know. So it's going to be an interesting year. But what I've seen of them, there's some really nice crops, and the UK we're growing some really good poinsettias, so we're not having to rely on too much of imports from Holland and Belgium, which is good news.
Brilliant, and like you say, nice to have really local ones this year.
Indeed.
And thinking about climate change and the fact that we're warming up, the RHS have been moving some of their collections around, haven't they, Chris?
Yeah, they have, Peter, and it's quite interesting. Basically, obviously RHS Wisley is obviously in Surrey, very warm, very dry, and there's two national collections they have down there, both the rhubarb and the gooseberry.
Okay.
So two fruiting plants.
Yeah, because last year my rhubarb didn't do at all well. It had sort of semi-collapsed. I must say I didn't water it an awful lot, but yes, it didn't do great. So the RHS was struggling with their rhubarbs and gooseberries in Surrey, were they?
Yeah, so they've made a decision, which is quite radical, to move up to the RHS quarters at Bridgewater, which is just outside Manchester. Manchester, famous for its rain, of course, its heavy rainfall, but it's not just the rain, it's the temperatures, because obviously Surrey's nice and warm as well. Basically, rhubarb needs between 7 to 9 weeks below 3 degrees.
All right, okay.
So that helps to put the plant. We're talking about putting plants in slumber for bare-rooted plants. Well, it's the same for rhubarb. It needs a cool, cold rest. And then you can then start forcing it, usually in late January, by putting a dustbin or putting one of those lovely decorative rhubarb forces on top to start your crop. So
because they warm it up. Because just thinking about that, when the commercial growers often use fridges, don't they, to cool the rhubarb corms down.
Yep.
And then I guess you can plant them out and put them into a little cloche and off they go, isn't it? Really quickly and early. Yeah,
the famous, I think it's the rhubarb triangle. That's up in Yorkshire, isn't it? Wakefield area. There's a famous lot of growers up there, and they obviously have got the temperatures there. It's nice and cold in that part of Yorkshire, and of course, then they to produce forced rhubarb for the restaurants and for the supermarkets. They then use artificial lights to extend the season. So from suddenly being cold, completely immobile, they're given obviously warmth, light, and of course then they produce and off they go, and they produce those amazing rhubarb sticks with that delicious flavour. So that's a good reason for and I think the gooseberries was following the same fate. Although I had heard that I think the RHS are doing quite a lot of research on gooseberries because they've lost favour. I mean, they're not as popular as they used to be, and I think
they got thorns on them, Chris. They prickle you when you go and try and get the gooseberries off them.
Yeah, and some of the best varieties are the older varieties. Of course, are very susceptible to mildew, which of course can put a real bacner on it. So, so the two main collections are moving north.
Moving up north. But in a way that surprises me, because to me, gooseberries, when they haven't had enough sun and warmth, are really acid and sour.
They need...
And in the summer, they need that sunshine. But I guess maybe they also need the water because they are very... I won't say liquid, but they've got a lot of liquid inside them.
Yeah, a key time, of course, when they're putting that.
So that probably is, if they don't get the water, they don't swell up properly.
That's it. Yeah. So interesting. But you just wonder what's next. I mean, the collection. For the rhubarb, it's 180 varieties. I mean, it's huge numbers.
Wow.
Yeah, so,
yes, that's quite a few rhubarbs.
It's for them to do with. And the other part of this report, which was in Garden News magazine, was the fact that the RHS have sort of listed the plants which haven't done well this summer. I'm sure we all know them.
Okay, and what other ones haven't done well then?
Well, no real surprises. Japanese maples, probably just too hot for them.
Right.
Yeah. And anemones, Japanese anemones, astilbes, quite a lot of ferns, heucheras, phlox, and even fuchsias have floundered in the hot weather. So, popular plants, the mainstay of our summer displays, aren't they? So that will be interesting. I don't think certainly will put me off growing my Japanese maples, but it's probably a bit of a lesson, isn't it, that we need to be a little bit more prepared for those high temperatures.
And do you think it's the temperature, or is it the lack of water, or the fact that the water is obviously evaporating far quicker?
I think you're right. It's a mixture of both, isn't it? I think it's a perfect storm of plants really struggling to get moisture, especially as some of those plants might be grown in pots too.
That's what I was thinking. I wonder if it's just they're drying out too quickly and not getting the chance to rehydrate.
And the temperatures as well. I mean, certainly when we visited Ball Colegrave, I think it was one of the hottest days. The temperatures on their pots was, in excess of like 40 degrees. And of course that cooks roots rather well.
Rather than letting them grow.
Helps them grow, yeah.
And now the contentious issue of who's got the oldest tree.
Yes.
It amuses me whenever I see this, because unfortunately, until obviously the tree's died and you cut it down and counted all the rings,
indeed.
are you ever going to know? And equally, so many of the really, really old trees have like multiple trunks, can I say?
That's right,
The middle's died, or the side, they've grown sideways. And
yeah, it's become multi-stemmed, or it's taken on a real bit of stature. It's become a living statue in a way.
And they look lovely. But anyway, the yews have hit the headlines from Surrey now, haven't they?
That's right. So they say
we've put them up against the American pines, haven't we, this time, Chris?
Yeah. So we've got two contenders, Peter. We've got the Great Basin Bristlecone Pine, which apparently frequents some part of South California. It's
closely guarded secret, though. We don't know where.
No, we know where. And that's suggested that it's over 5,000 years old.
Okay.
And then, of course, we've got our very own, and, we've got to be really coy about this, but the oldest yew area down in Newlands Corner. So it's actually got we can see where it is. That's down in Guildford near Surrey. And that has one of the largest population of yew. Was possibly more than the word possibly appears in the text. 5,000 years old. So there you go. You've got the battle of the giants, as it were.
The yew versus the pine.
Pine, yes.
Which one's older?
Yeah.
It's really interesting, because pines are obviously get quite large, and I suppose yew trees do as well, but they grow a little bit slower, don't they?
Yeah. I always think of pines, though, the wood not being as strong as the timber not being as well. It's always considered a cheaper bit of wood, isn't it? Really,
well, it's a softwood,
it's
isn't it, rather than a yew, which is the perfect bow and arrow making wood from memory, and that's why we used to grow them all those years ago.
Indeed, and being a conifer, it's evergreen, so it's it sits on the landscape very well. So that this is all to do with ConservationFoundation.co.uk. They've created this heritage trees sort of website, and of course it's also celebrating its 40th anniversary. So to bring that to our attention, we were introduced to the Newlands Corner Yews. And so
there's some. I've not been to that area, but I know. I'm just thinking about sort of woodlands. We've got obviously Burnham Beeches, which isn't that far south from us. That's sort of South Amersham, is it?
South Buckinghamshire, isn't it?
Yeah, they've got some famous pollarded trees from memory.
They have, reputed to be many, many hundreds of years old, perhaps not into the thousands, but certainly pollarded, which is a different way of training and pruning. If you ever get a chance to go over to France, you often see, especially the big roads there, across the wonderful arable farms, they pollard a lot of their poplars. So they cut them back at about probably 2 or 3 meters. Right. So you get this explosion of sort of shoots. So they're very restricted. They do look a bit eerie, a little bit odd, but it obviously keeps them. They pollard sometimes the wood for using for different reasons. You might pollard your willows or your hazel. Okay. For withies, if you're going to do that, or if you're going to create a cricket bat or something. Yeah. So you might use those for there. So it's a good way of restricting your growth, and often used obviously in certain hedges.
Excellent. So I guess if you want to go and see some old beech trees, go to South Bucks. If you want to see some really old yew trees, you can go to Surrey.
Surrey, yes, and explore and go and explore these. Especially at this time of the year. Winter walks are a good way of getting rid of some of that Christmas excess, aren't they? As we're about to enter that period, and enjoy the landscapes.
And fertilisers are in the news again, but This time not from sort of over-fertilising and polluting the ground that way, but actually by confusing the bees and the bumblebees.
Yes, I was quite amazed. This is some research done over in the University of Bristol, Peter, and they found that treating flowers with synthetic fertilisers can cause what they sort of describe as an electrical field, if you like. It's
right,
so part, which actually makes around the flowers, and it makes it more difficult for the bees to identify the species of flower. So in a way, it messes up with their sort of guidance system. In a sort of a Star Warsy way. It's basically having a knock-on effect. So it disorientates the bumblebees, so they can't actually find the flowers they need to pollinate and to obviously take food from.
It certainly makes sense, because I know bees do specifically feed on certain crops at certain times of the year, and they are very specific as to what they want to eat. So if they can't tell the difference between the tomato flower and the apple flower, or whatever it is that's been sprayed, then that really, I can totally understand that.
And it's also reducing the fact that you're trying to encourage a wide range of biodiversity into your garden by doing something which you feel is a good thing for your garden. You might be having a detrimental effect on it. And for me, that's quite interesting, because I foliar feed a lot during the summer. I use a lot of foliar feed, either Miracle Grow or Phosphagen with a bit of Maxi Crop in. I'm a great believer in those, so maybe I need to be careful when I do it. Perhaps I need to be thinking
stick the food into the soil, maybe, rather than...
Indeed, just adopt a different way. But it's interesting, and these findings, they're suggesting could have a very negative impact on the natural world. And as I say, we always tend to think it's all about the actual pesticide causing the problem, but actually just fertilisers.
Fertilisers can also be a source of issues. Well, I guess that sounds very believable.
Yeah, it does indeed in this present world. Yeah.
And our friend Stuart Lowen from Ball Colegrave has been telling us that his new award-winning Apple Blossom Busy Lizzie should be available next year.
That's exciting, isn't it? So, back in July, we got to see the new Glimmer range of these varieties of Busy Lizzie, which have got really good downy mildew resistance. Because if we go back a few years, Peter, basically our Busy Lizzie patching sales just died because
they all got mildew, didn't they?
Yeah, and these are all seed raised, of course. So there's been a lot of research, a lot of breeding, bringing some of the qualities of the older seed varieties, which have wonderful colours, into the next century now with this extra genetic bit of work on the double flowers and the compactness as well. So they've created a really good plant. I think there's 7 colours in the series. Last year, obviously, or this year, should I say, we were looking at them as a new plant, and of course, 2023 they'll be available in the garden centre probably the last end of April into May onwards. So if you want to revisit the Busy Lizzie in a double form, not a single flower, then this is the plant to go to. And it did perform really well. It was a lovely, lovely plant. Mine were flowering, the plants I got flowered right into October before it ran out of steam.
Brilliant.
And I've put it in the greenhouse. I'm hoping I can overwinter it, but if I don't, I'll buy myself a new one, because it's well worth it. Yeah.
Excellent. And I also see Empomia Solar Tower. Now, Empomia, isn't that Morning Glory?
It is, yes. It's the bindweed family.
A proper fast grower, isn't it? Yeah. Now, I wonder if this solar tower grows quite as well as the Morning Glory. Yeah. It's got a nice colour, though, doesn't it?
Fantastic colour. Yeah, and of course, Ipomea is related. It's obviously in the sweet potato family.
Really? I never knew that.
Yeah. So you
aren't they poisonous, though?
Yeah, the good old Ipomea is toxic, so be careful as you're handling it, and certainly don't eat those roots.
Yeah, it's the seeds as well, from memory, and the flowers. So yeah, it's a lovely flower, and a lovely fast-growing. Yeah. What would you call it? Coverage plant, I suppose.
It's a climber.
A climber that goes everywhere, but definitely don't eat it.
Quite invasive. I grew not this solar tower, because obviously a new one in some pots this year, and I had 2 pots of them. One of them flowered really well with these big blue flowers. They only last a day or 2. The other pot, not one flower. So,
really?
And they were next to each other. They were both in the same peat-free compost. but one didn't and one did. Yeah.
But are they male and female plants?
No, I think they were grown from seed.
Okay.
So it's a little bit despondent, but the flowers are lovely, and and it did seem to enjoy the hot weather as well. So
yeah, that's my memory of it. It does well on a sunny spot.
Indeed, yeah.
And thinking about, obviously, plants that grow in garden centres, I see Blue Diamond is growing even more. They've taken over Van Hage's.
Yeah, so Van Hage's are based in Hertfordshire, if memory serves me correct. They've got three amazing garden centres, actually. One at Cheney's, which is one I used to pop into when I went to Cheney's Manor.
Okay.
Many years ago. And, of course, obviously some large garden centres. Yeah, I mean...
I've been to the one in, I would say, Peterborough, that's on the old brownfield rubbish site.
And then their main one is Great Amwell, and that's I think that's their flagship
store. Flagship store,
yeah,
is it?
So I think... but no, obviously wonderfully run garden centres under the new Blue Diamond banner now.
Because, when you see them, you think, wow, this is must be a big family. But it's not. Van Hage's are they were a family business, and obviously now joined the Blue Diamond Group, which is quite a few garden centres now, isn't it?
It's increased quite considerably,
Nearly got to the same number as Wyvale, has it?
I was going to say, I wasn't going to use the Wyvale word, but they're getting that way, aren't they?
Yeah, so hopefully they'll do a good job. But they're keeping the name and trading as Van Hage's still, even though they're not.
Which is so good to hear, isn't it? I think, yeah.
Hopefully the staff will get to keep their jobs.
Indeed.
And then who else has been taken over?
Well,
it's Rosebourne, isn't it? The food shop / garden centre. Hadn't been going long from my recollection. Couldn't actually remember speaking about them earlier quite how long they've been going, but that was Carol Paris, and used to be president, I think, of the HTA a couple of years ago, before she took on this role. But they've sold out to Hilliers.
So the Hilliers now climbed to 22 garden centres. So they're catching up with Blue Diamond, sort of. But no, obviously a lot of emphasis now of Hilliers has gone over to retail. Their nursery, obviously their famous nursery, supplies all their garden centres, which, of course, for us is a bit of a disappointment because
they pulled out of supplying all and sundry and just now concentrate on their own garden centres, which is totally understandable. When you've got 20-odd garden centres, you need an awful lot of plants to service all those garden centres.
But as we found out from good old Alan Down last month, of course, the heritage of Hilliers, all the wonderful species and varieties which are available through their garden centres is just not available to other independents, which I think is a bit of a shame, really. Yeah, it is. But no, it's good news, and of course, this is yet another big inclusion to growing the garden centre groups.
And talking about Hilliers Nursery, the sort of plant growing side of things, they've been buying up bit of land, have they?
They've obviously got a very good wallet of money at the moment, Peter. So they've just bought a 200-acre flexicum farm over in Liss, and they've got basically that 200 acres is going to amount to 30,000 trees grown there at any one time, and it's a £4 million purchase, so big money. But they are seeing such a huge demand in trees, which is so good to hear as well. They need to obviously the space to develop, and obviously they're growing it into a much better brand with the Hilliers name.
Brilliant, yeah, because tree nurseries do well in this country, don't they? And I went out on a garden centre visit recently to Burford Garden Centre, which is a sort of top of the range garden centre. It's a lovely garden centre, but they had some apple trees there that were £1,000 each, and the pots were 1,000 litres or so. Wow. I've never seen. These were trees that you'd need a forklift to lift them.
You couldn't put those in a garden centre trolley very well, could you?
And they had, I would say, a good half a dozen of them. So if you wanted to create a apple tree avenue, it would have been perfect. Yes. But as long as you got very deep pockets.
Indeed. Hilliers sort of went on to say that the reason they want to do this is that the demand for government tree planting targets has increased.
Okay.
Which is maybe so that's not in the towns and the cities, but obviously I think about all the new builds going up and all the new developments, and of course the planners are raising the bar now, wanting more greenery in these new areas as well. And of course, the more greening, hopefully that's going to have a beneficial effect on climate change, isn't it? So,
hopefully,
hats off to Hilliers for that sort of investment.
And for people who like the English flag and the lovely blues, reds and whites, read a nice article in Amateur Gardening about British Garden Centre Group promoting planting some bulbs and muscari, red tulips, white tulips and blue muscari, or you could use, they're suggesting bluebells. Now, Chris, you were suggesting this could work well as a lasagna planting, couldn't
That's it. And I know we're into December, but you can still grab some bulbs at this time of the year. Often garden centres are clearing the areas out because obviously they're putting the last minute Christmas in.
Makes room for Christmas,
It
doesn't it?
does,
So you can grab yourself a bargain.
Yeah. So so your tulips, so your red tulips and your white tulips would be perfect. And the idea of a lasagna planting is you put the bulbs which flower latest in first. So you put in 2 or 3 layers within your pot. So you put your tulips in there.
So would you put your muscari in first and then the tulips on top, or
no? So the tulips would go in first, and then
muscari on top.
On top, that's it. And then you could put some, so it'd be red and white tulips. Of course, there's lots of different varieties. I mean, the Triumph ones would be good. I mean, red. I mean, there's good varieties like Red Riding Hood, which is a lovely tulip, isn't it? And of course, there's some of the white ones too. So maybe try and go for sort of mid to late flowering, I would say. But then I was saying, Peter, in a way, if you create this lasagna pot, you want it to look nice over a number of weeks or even months.
Yep.
Doing its crescendo, its red and white tulips perhaps in May, linking up to the coronation of the king. So you could do it that way.
That's a good idea.
And then,
what about if you wanted to do like a flower bed, a sort of celebration of the royal colours?
Oh, very patriotic, yeah.
What would you use for getting something that all comes up together in, if you wanted to plant a British flag?
Bearing in mind it's May, your summer bedding's probably going to be out of the question. So have a look at your red, white violas and pansies. There's plenty of those. You can get those as straight colours now, as clear colours. And then for your blue, forget-me-nots.
That's a good idea.
Myosotis. Yeah. So you can get those in, obviously, blue. You can even get white myosotis as well. And then lasagna plant in the border. So go down a little bit deeper, do 1 layer, and then do another layer in your soil. So you create double the impact in the space, and it makes your bulbs really work for the space as well.
Brilliant. Great idea. Thanks, Chris. I don't know if I've talked about them before, but on my drive home, I get to see some giant hogweed in the summer, which it's not a ban. Is it a banned plant or a sort of one that you're meant to notify the council about?
It's notifiable because obviously it's pretty toxic. Those stems and sap, if it gets on your hands, cause a photosensitivity issues. So that makes you extra sensitive to the sunlight. Yeah, which usually ends up in some really nasty swellings and blisters. Oh my word, it's not very nice at all if that happens.
So Northampton Council, if you're listening, you've got some giant hogweed growing near the Bedford roundabout, Rushmere Road. And they need to go as soon as possible. But of course, cow parsley is in the same family, and people often sort of mix that up. And of course, cow parsley is the opposite. You still have to be careful with the foliage on those. You can get a bit of a rash, but nowhere near as toxic. And it's about half the size as well, because a giant hogweed, I mean, that gets a good, I'm going to say 3 meters tall in the height of summer, and it grows amongst the cow parsley on the bottom of Rushmere Road. So it looks lovely, but obviously not a good plant. No, don't, and certainly don't get mixed them up. But we've found some even more poisonous plants, haven't we? We have, yes. This is an article which appeared on one of the Welsh websites when I was doing my research, Peter, and it's actually over in Conway, so it's North Wales. North Wales, yeah. And basically, the headline is "World's Most Poisonous Plant Found in Welsh Flower Beds." I mean, you really couldn't make that up, could you? This plant is Ricinus. It's the castor oil plant. Isn't it the fake castor oil plant? Well, yes. This is the best thing about common names, isn't it? Yeah. Is it the fake or the real one? Well, but no, what's the Latin name for it, Chris? So this one, the toxic one, is Ricinus. Ricin. If I say the word ricin, then you start to think about
Russian spies and
yeah. I can't remember who it was, but someone did something in the underground with
That's
rice.
it. Oh, it's incredibly toxic, incredibly poisonous, and unfortunately, this particular plant, beautiful as it is, and to paint a picture of it, it produces very palmate leaves, very much like the other castor oil plant.
The genuine one.
Yeah, Fatsia japonica, which is the one we used to grow as a houseplant many years ago. Now we grow it as an outdoor shrub, really good shrub. But that has green leaves. The most poisonous plant has red leaves, which are very pretty, and that's why they're used as a height plant in bedding displays to give height and interest. And it produces these sort of orangey red flowers. They're almost like thistle-like flowers, quite spiky, and inside, of course, they contain the nasty, very, very poisonous seeds. And I have to say, Peter, I do grow this plant occasionally at home, and you can buy the seeds, and there's lots of markings on the seed packet to say that it is poisonous, but it grows really well, it germinates, and it will make a really good plant, but you've got to treat it with a lot of respect.
Excellent. And the big butterfly count results are in, aren't they, Chris?
They are. So this all took place between the 15th of July and August the 7th this summer, and not very good, I'm afraid. So the count was a lot down on previous years. In fact, it's gone down to a 13-year low.
Wow.
And what's worrying is obviously it included some of the more well-known favourites like red admirals and small whites and such like. So they were missing from the observations too. So,
my cabbage whites have done well this year. I see there's still quite a few of them flying around, but like you say, peacocks and red admirals and the nicer, sort of more ornate-looking ones. That's a shame.
It is, yeah. And I mean, they said partly maybe to climate change and obviously to the hot weather that might have had a knock-on effect. But it's still worrying. But however, there's some good news from it. Some species did show a revival. So they included the comma and the common blue and the holly blue.
Oh right.
Which I think from my days of butterfly spotting, they are quite significant ones.
They're lovely ones from memory. They're beautiful. Yeah. I can remember, like you, as a child. Yeah. I was always after one because they looked lovely beautiful in the books, but I never found one. No.
Indeed. So obviously it's food for thought, isn't it? And I think, and as we know, as a garden centre and as a garden centre trade, we are encouraging people to plant, plants for pollinators and look out for that butterfly logo on your plants.
Definitely. The seed packets have all got the little bee symbol on, which is a good indication they're good for pollinators.
So plant a few more for next year, perhaps.
And the NGS Visitors Handbook, I see, has been published for 2023. So thinking ahead to next year already and those lovely gardens we can go and visit.
And I would say, Peter, I mean, with Christmas, literally on our doorstep now, what a nice little gift for somebody who really likes
That's a really good idea, actually. I might get that for my mother. Oh, I can't say that, can I? Because
that's not a good thing. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, in a way, it's just such a good book to have because obviously you've got all the references and obviously all the descriptions. I mean, you can do it on your telephone. They've got a nice posh app and things, but actually to hold the book and use it and have it in the car when you're out and about, because obviously you sometimes rely on their wonderful signs they put out if you happen to be driving past. But if you've got to plan your visit, then you need something a little bit more of a reference.
That's a really good idea. Yeah. Like you say, you can plan a few days out across the summer, and as long as the weather's nice, you can
indeed
go and enjoy some nice garden visits and possibly some cake.
Of course, there has to be cake, doesn't it, Peter?
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
And thinking of cake, I suppose better do some jobs before we start thinking about eating cake again, shouldn't we, Chris?
Indeed, and we've got a few jobs for this month, Peter.
What do we got to get on with then?
So thinking about that Christmas tree again, when you get it home from the garden centre, obviously it's going to be netted. If you can, give it a little bit of a respite in some water.
I normally sort of de-net them and then go and stand them in like one of the tub trugs just out leaning up against the side of the house overnight, because it lets the branches drop down as well, I find, which makes it a bit harder getting it back in the house.
So that could be a bit tricky.
But at least it means when you put it out, you don't have to wait quite so long, because if you don't leave it sort of 24 hours for the leaves to drop out, or not the branches to drop, when you put your baubles on, they all pull down, and it looks lovely when you do it, and you walk around, walk away, and come back the next day, and it's all changed.
It's got Christmas tree sag.
It's got droop, yeah. That's it. But yeah, I always cut the bottom inch or so off the trunk, which I think that's meant to help the water go in.
Indeed. Do you use a stand with a reservoir in? Or
yes, I've got a nice little stand with a spike, sort of a slightly conical spike, so I drill the hole out again so it fits on the spike.
Perfect.
And cut the bottom inch off. And the other thing that I do is mist my tree when it's in the house.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if it's the right thing to do, and I'm very fortunate I've got RO water, which is essentially pure water, so it doesn't leave water stains all over the baubles, and lights I've got a waterproof, so it doesn't bother. But I think if you can, that's meant to help as well.
It will be,
it just keeps it a little bit moisture and stops it evaporating.
And I suppose the usual sort of advice: make sure you keep your tree, position it away from obviously open fires or from wood burners, and away from radiators, anywhere there's lots of direct heat where it's going to dry the plant out. And obviously, you know, the cooler you can keep the room, the better. I mean, that's easier said than done over the festive period, isn't it? But that will help too.
Great.
And then thinking sort of outside, and you know, we're going to be obviously eating well in the next few weeks as Christmas. Of course, we've got to think about our bird feeders as well, and making sure we've got a nice mix of different bird foods. You know, whether it's sunflowers, peanuts, mixed seeds. Birds are just like us; they like a bit of variety. So
and the ones that really fat balls, they always seem to go first on my bird.
They do, yes.
Yeah, the birds seem to love those, and they suet treats. I personally don't use them, but I know we sell an awful lot of them, and they seem very popular at this time of the year. But I guess they're nice and fatty for the birds, so they're full of energy.
Indeed, and if the weather obviously does get a bit colder, then they're going to do that, and of course they're going to need water as well. So if you have got a little water pool or something where you can keep that nice and topped up on some fresh bird bath.
Yeah, because we talked about that, making sure if it does get frosty and cold, to go and put a bit of warm water on it and defrost it so that they can have somewhere to drink.
Keep it topped up with some nice fresh water every other day, perhaps, just to help them along there. So make sure if you've got them set up in your tree, or if you've got a proper bird feeding station. I know we sell a few of those over the course of the year. They can look quite a nice feature in the garden too if they're nicely set up.
Yeah, and I guess cutting back shrubbery. I'm just thinking, I seem to remember my grandmother used to make her own sort of wreaths for the door, and she used to go and hack back the holly tree and make her own holly wreaths from that.
If you've got lots of evergreen material, then it's a really good way. I mean, I think we mentioned last month about maybe going to a wreath making session, but actually if it's getting a little bit later on in the season, but this needs to be looking good for a number of days over the festive period. Have a look around, go around with the secateurs, and if you've got some nice berrying plants, some cotoneaster, maybe some of the fruits on your crab apples, they would look rather nice, wouldn't they?
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. And
be inventful and have something which is handmade and hand produced from your garden. That's a nice testament to put on your front door, I would say.
Definitely, it's a great idea. And I guess with frosts sort of looming, wrapping them up in fleece if we haven't done it yet.
Yes, I think we've
moving them.
Yeah, I mean, it's all this autumn has been a bit tricky, and as we are now into winter. Yeah, you need to be making sure those plants are protected, either bringing them indoors in a cold or unheated greenhouse or a garage. If you're bringing them inside and they've got lots of leaves on, they're going to need light. So try and give them a nice light spot. But just hold on the watering, let them have a bit of a rest. And fingers crossed, Mother Nature will see them through. I mean, cannas, for example. I know my cannas are still very green at the moment, and some recommendation to cut them back. But I've read a number of experts now suggesting just leave them as a green plant, and that will help them come through the winter a lot better, rather than chopping them hard back. So I'm going to be adopting that little rule this year.
Well, see how they do in the spring. It's interesting.
And of course, I think the other thing, Peter, as well, certainly in the garden centre at the moment, we've got some lovely fragrant shrubs, and if you're looking for sort of last minute Christmas gift ideas for people who really like their gardens, a nice fragrant Daphne, or a lovely Christmas box, Sarcococca, which we sell plenty of as a hedging plant, but buy it as a shrub, have it somewhere, they can pot it into a pot close by the door where they can actually enjoy the fragrance. That would be good as well. So have a think, for your gardening friends. I know, the cop out is to get a garden voucher, a good old HTA or a local garden centre voucher, but sometimes actually buying a plant is far more personable, isn't it?
I think so, and you think the number of houseplants we sell as gifts. I mean, a nice orchid for Christmas or a nice or azalea for Christmas. I mean, they make lovely presents, don't they? They're nice and full of flower, bit of cheer for the winter.
It is, yeah. And I always think, maybe it's me being the usual, trying to make things easier. I mean, buying a gift of a plant, you can get them gift wraps. That saves on the Christmas wrapping as well. If you leave it to the last minute, maybe difficult to hide from nearest and dearest, perhaps. But if it's for family members, that might be a good way of getting out of the Christmas wrapping too.
Brilliant idea, and nice bow.
It
sorts it right out, doesn't it? Brilliant, great.
And I suppose if you're getting out and about, to get rid of that Christmas dinner, there's a bit of pruning you can be doing, Peter, now. Sort of fruit trees, and we often talk about winter pruning. If you haven't done them during the summer, give them a tidy up. If because they're denuded of leaves, you can see the framework, so you can go in there and open the tree up if there's any dead or dying or damaged wood or diseased wood. Cut that out, try and open that. And if you've got any, espalier trees, give them a bit of a tidy up as well. So it's, you get a nice, crisp, December day. There's nothing quite like it, going out and doing a bit of pruning.
Well, I think the sensation of walking on frozen ground, if it's like nicely turned over, it's lovely when you see the white frost on the.
Oh yes, yeah. Just be careful on your lawn though, because obviously you can.
True.
You have to be a little bit careful there. So, but certainly that would be good as well. And we were talking about rhubarb earlier, the fact that they've been moved to the north from the south. Yep. If you've got large clumps of rhubarb in your own garden, now is the time, December, to do a bit of lifting and dividing if it's a very mature clump.
Yeah, because my rhubarb, I was talking to my father about this. I've been wanting to split it for a while now. I'd say it's about a couple of foot across the crown. Yeah. It's enormous. Yeah. And I originally thought I was going to have to dig the whole lot up and split it once I dug it up. But he was saying, no, just chop some off the edge.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'll just pick. Now, do I do it when it's all dead, or is it best to leave it till it started sprouting in the spring and you can see where is it buds?
The buds will grow. Yeah. So you'll see that within the crown there'll be sort of resting buds there. So as long as it's nice and plump, the bit you detach, I would do it. Do it this month or into January.
Okay.
And detach there, and remember the outer extremes of a plant, as we know with perennials, usually is the younger the plant. So it's in the middle is obviously the oldest part. So you'll revitalise your new clump by starting with a fresh offset.
Okay, and the other thing I learnt many years ago with rhubarb is that you can't harvest it for sort of a couple of years after planting it. Mm-hmm. So with the old crown, if I'm just chopping bits off the edge of it, can I still pull from it next spring?
Yes, so your original mother plant is fine.
Just the babies that I pull off it, I'll leave for a couple of years.
Give them all nice mulch, give them some nice compost, or if you get some well-rotted manure, give them a real treat over the next couple of months, and then that'll put the plants in the right sort of stage then to start development. Probably you might be able to pull a few, if you've got a decent size offshoot, you might be able to have maybe one or two sticks in the second year, but probably from year 3 you'll be back into production again.
Well, they grow. I mean, my rhubarb grows like a wildfire. It's a monster, and so I don't have to worry about not having enough rhubarb to eat. But I do like dividing it just to keep it growing, as it were, because I don't want your mother plant to be the only one to die out. Yeah,
I think that's the thing, revitalising and knowing when to stop pulling as well, to give the plant a chance, especially this summer we've experienced. Of course, the plants were probably suffering from a lot of stress on the roots as we got into sort of June time.
Yep.
So knowing when to stop, and then obviously allowing the plants to grow as well. Also, as we're thinking about making our homes nice and fragrant for Christmas.
Yep.
If you've been growing and forcing some hyacinths, now's the time to start bringing them in gradually from where you've had them resting.
Yeah.
So if you've had them in the dark, they'll come out. They'll be very yellow, very chlorotic looking. Literally 3 or 4 days in a nice light windowsill, kept quite cool. Those shoots will go nice and green. And then hopefully in the centre of the buds there, you'll start to see the flower spike. Yeah. And then you can pot them up. Usually put 3 together in a nice bowl, and often use a little cyclamen or a little fern in the middle just to finish the display off, or maybe a little primrose if you're so inclined to give it a bit more colour.
That's a good idea.
So, PC, with our houseplants as well, we just need to be a little bit careful on the watering. Sparing is the key at this time of year. Don't want to overdo it. Obviously, that isn't good for all plants, really.
Bog plants like obviously a bit of water, but my herbs were suffering and turning into bog plants. I realised a couple of weeks ago that when I looked out, the sources are all full of water because it's obviously all this rain that we've been having, and they're just sat in them, and I hadn't thought to empty the sources. Okay. So is it a good idea to take the sources away in the winter and just leave them on the pots on the ground, or what's your thoughts?
I would say yes, if the plants are reasonably well established in the pots, so they've got a good strong root system. The last thing you want them is sitting in water. That's going to cause all sorts of root stress on them as well. And then obviously start thinking about returning them, perhaps once we get into February, March, when it starts to warm up and they start to put some growth on. But err on the edge of caution and
keep them drier over the winter.
Definitely, yes. And obviously, if they're standing, if they're outside, if they're on decking or on a paving slab, you might need to then think about getting some pot feet to raise them, especially some more mature plants. So have a look at those possibilities. You can buy terracotta pot feet, and you can get plastic ones now. So they're not too expensive, and they can save your plant from excesses.
Well, I guess that's probably terrible if you've got it in a saucer and that then freezes.
Oh gosh, yeah,
that would kill all the roots in the bottom of the pot as well.
Yeah, so. and then of course it would stop any rain then penetrating through. So it's a double whammy. It's frozen soil and then it's overwatered. Yeah, so not good. Yeah.
Okay, I best go do that then, Chris.
Indeed. And I suppose just a reminder, I'm sure many of our listeners will have got their greenhouse up to speed for preparations for next month when we start to do a bit of seed sowing and starting new plants off. But if you haven't cleaned your greenhouse, get the glass cleaned and get the Jeyes Fluid out, or the Citrox product on the market, which is obviously based on citronella, to give it a really good disinfectant, all the nooks and crannies. But outside, clean the glass, make sure it's allowing as much light as possible, and obviously clean the gutters of your greenhouse as well to stop any problems. It's a very therapeutic thing, cleaning your greenhouse, I have to say.
But it does look brilliant, doesn't it? You've got nice, clean, shiny glass, and you don't realise how much difference it makes to the light levels until you've done it.
It sort of incentivises you to actually start doing some seed sowing and things. So that catalyst is worth doing that. And of course, make sure all your seed trays and pots are given a dipping as well. Make sure they're nicely sterilised.
Yeah, because you can sterilise them at the same time, can't you? And then they're all ready for reusing again next year. Yeah,
it's definitely a wet weather job, but well worth doing.
And any pests that we need to be thinking about in the greenhouse?
Yes.
Spider mite, isn't it, this time of year?
Yes, spider mite, if you're keeping your greenhouse heated, it could be a problem. But again, if you give it a really good clear out, it would be good. But red spider mite indoors is more of an issue. So mist spraying, so getting that sprayer out and just spraying water onto your plants on a regular basis. I know in the garden centre here, we mist spray in the morning, every morning on our foliage plants.
Okay, and that keeps the spider mite away, does it?
It improves the humidity. Red spider mite loves dry, arid conditions. Put moisture into the atmosphere. It's moist. It doesn't like those conditions. So you're creating the perfect conditions it doesn't like, and that should hopefully deter them.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And thinking about houseplants, Chris, we've got a TV celebrity gardener, I suppose, do we call him?
An Instagram sensation. Is that big?
Yes,
The gentleman up nicely.
That's it. So a discussion on houseplants in a couple of weeks' time with Tony Le Bresson.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to it. He has obviously done remarkably well on social media, and he's certainly a go-to person for everything houseplants. So it would be nice to chat to him in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah, and if you're in Northampton in the town centre, he's got a lovely shop. It's well worth a visit. I went in there a week or so ago, and yeah, I was blown away by some of the houseplants in there. It's really
fantastic. Sounds
interesting.
Really, yeah. And the name of the shop is Not Another Jungle?
Not Another Jungle, that's it.
That's it. Yeah, so, yeah.
Well worth a visit if you're in Northampton. So look forward to that.
And, as we're now entering that Christmas time, it's sort of preparations, really, isn't it, Peter? Yeah, so...
enjoy the last leaf sweepings and sorting everything out.
Yeah, and the 21st of December, of course, it starts to get lighter. We go into the winter
That's
equinox.
true, yeah.
So it's all good, isn't it? So so
winter equinox coming, so it must be time to go Christmas shopping, Chris.
That sounds a good plan.
Nice one. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Peter. Today's show was brought to you by Buckingham Garden Centre and Nurseries. The show was hosted by Chris Day and Peter Brown. The show was produced by Peter Brown. And our thanks to Chiltern Music Therapy for providing the music. Thanks for listening.
At Chiltern Music Therapy, we want everyone to know the difference that music can make in their lives. From parents and their premature babies in hospital to grandparents with dementia. We provide music therapy and community music services to people of all ages and needs across England. We work both digitally and in person in people's homes, care homes, schools, hospitals and hospices. Find out more at chilternmusictherapy.co.uk.